right, everybody. Thank you so much for being here, and happy PAX, happy Friday. So let's move right into it. So I'm going to open disclosure. I'm going to talk about the title, and I just want to let you know that I intentionally wrote a really high bar title just to beat out all the other people who pitched panels for some kind of getting into the industry shit. So don't take it too seriously, and neither will we. So I usually. This is my third year doing this panel, and I always, draw on the Boston game developer industry, especially the indies and the AAAs that we have here. We have a real diverse community. Normally, Mr. Ichiro Lamb, who's the president of Dejimon Games, comes in and blows the roof off with some sort of elaborate and articulate, speech, and really rouses the passion and all that noise. But he also actually gives extremely good points, especially regarding what to do here at PAX. So hopefully you used your time here on Friday wisely with some of the vendors, maybe the expo hall panels or whatnot. If you do have the 3-day action or you're going to be here tomorrow, he always drops really good hints as to how to engage some people that you may be interested in either just collaborating with, working with, getting advice from, or whatnot. So excuse the wall of text while I kind of read my interaction with Ichiro, because he couldn't be here thanks to a GDC overlap. And we're going to start off with this and then move right into the panelists. So Ichiro always says, be a major part of the community. Go to every meetup there is on game dev, especially if you live in Boston, because we are blessed with an incredibly diverse, versatile, and active, game community, and game development community, and of course higher education community as well. Or any other rich city in game development. And I know some of you are saying, well, what if I'm not from a concentrated area with a lot of developers and artists and creative people? We'll definitely get to that, because I know it's a major concern. Engage any of the developers at PAX whose game you truly enjoy, or any team that you'd like to work on. Talk about what you do, ask why the developer chose to go the way that they did. If you're an artist, say, what did you use to do this? Why did you do it this way? I have a thing, or I have a project I've worked on, I chose Maya. These are the tools I know of, why did you make the game in this? And really make it interesting as to what you're engaging them on. Talk your trade with the artist of the team or whatnot. And dig down deep into the trade that you are a part of if you're an artist, a developer, a designer, or so on. Give them a conversation they'll remember when they're looking through their emails after PAX. Say, because you're probably going to get their contact information, you're probably going to write to them and say, hey, thanks for your time, this has been awesome, and just give them a reason to remember you, because they will say, oh, I remember you. Volunteer at every damn opportunity there is to volunteer at. That's a quote from Ichiro. And one big thought, keep refining what you're, this is very recent because of their launch and successful launch of their Dejimon's most recent game. Keep refining what you're working on as well as the way you pitch it. Our creative writing game Elegy was our best press launch ever with bits from Wired, Hulu, and NPR. But it took a while to figure out how to succinctly describe it. We try one way and people would say, that's interesting, and we try another and they'd say, holy cow, can I play it right now? And I know this because I'm a business developer for different industries, and sometimes I nail it when I'm talking to you on the floor, and other times I'm tripping over my words even though I've said it 1,000 times. Practice makes perfect, and really think about the receiving end of the words you're trying to say if you're trying to convey a message like, hey, check out my game, or why I want to work for you, something like that. So, thank you, Ichiro, and and one more thing, he's mentioned something to Caroline. He told you that apparently your hat's on crooked, Caroline, so he has a friend. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to ask each of the panelists to start off with straight up, here is one thing that I wish I either knew earlier, or I would highly recommend that you do. Do this, and it will benefit you greatly, and of course follow it up with a don't do this, or make sure you avoid this pitfall that I fell into as well. We'll go right down, and if you have more than one, please feel free to elaborate on it, take your time. And when the speakers come up, you feel free to introduce yourself, but I will have a slide for each of the speakers as they speak. So please take down their Twitter information, throw them questions after the panel, thank them for their time up here, all that noise. Follow their their developments and the work that they're doing, and of course go see them anywhere they are here at PAX. Okay, so why don't we go ahead and start with Caroline?
Sure. Can you guys all hear me? Yeah. All right, good. Hi everyone, I'm Caroline Murphy. I am an executive producer of Boston FIG, which is the Boston Festival of Indie Games. If you haven't been, you should go. It's awesome. We have over 200 indie game developers come and show their games, and it takes place in the fall. So check it out, bostonfig.com. I'm also I co-run Boston Indies, which is a game development and design meetup group. And if you live in the Boston area and you want to be in the games industry and you haven't been to Boston Indies, what are you doing? you should go to Boston Indies. This is where these things happen. This is where people make connections. It's an open group. You can find out more about us on our website, bostonindies.com. And we have meetups every single month, and they're totally free to attend, and it's a BYOB deal most of the time, and it's a lot of fun, so check it out. In terms of, let's see, we were supposed to give a thing.
Yeah, maybe you
Just
mention
like
a mistake you made in the past.
Mistake I made in the past? I've never made any mistakes. Oh, damn it! Always have your head on straight. Otherwise the chair is going to make fun of you, even though he's not here. I would say, don't make the mistake of assuming that it's that hard. It's not difficult to get into the games industry. It just requires consistency and follow through. So as long as you're a consistent person who can follow through and ship, then do that, and you'll find you're already in the games industry.
Hello. My name is Chris Foster. I am crusty and old. I've been a designer for over 20 years. I've most recently been at Harmonix as a senior designer. I'm working currently on Rock Band 4, which is a great way to get applause from Harmonix. Thank you very much. It's really it's a great project. Also, in my copious spare time, I am working on an iPad game with my 6-year-old son who does all the art and audio and is my project manager and keeps trying to create features into the game. So I have a few do's and don'ts. Here's an easy one for don't be an asshole. There are really talented people in this industry. They're not worth it if they're jerks. And I mean that. Like, it's really important in games above almost any size. If you're in a team larger than one, you need to have a really solid collaborative relationship, and that's built on trust. If you're lucky, it's built on friendship or almost a familial feeling. But the friction that can come from someone who doesn't know how to play well with others can be really devastating. In fact, the larger the team, the more damaging it can be to have a few people that don't know how to actually interact socially. So it's really important for you, regardless of how much talent you have and how much skill you have, really learn how to be a positive collaborator, and that can get you very far in this industry. Actually, I'll save the rest of mine for later for good interjections.
Hey guys, I'm Trevor. So,
He's very handsome.
So I've made games for a long time, not quite as long as Chris. I started off on the Dreamcast, made NBA 2K, a few other things. Was at a studio called Smilebit for a while, and we made freaky things, including Panzer Dragoon. And then I went indie around 2007, and I haven't started yet. I just actually launched a game on PlayStation Vita called Jungle Rumble. It's a rhythm game, so we're kind of competitors. In terms of do's and don'ts, one thing that I really did wrong early in my career is I didn't put myself out there. I'm very much an introverted, nerdy person who is so happy to spend my life in front of the dim glow of a monitor. But especially if you're going to be indie, you actually have to know people and connect with people. And you know, the age of the bedroom coder is over, unfortunately for me. So that's a mistake that I made early on.
Okay, so my name is Benjamin, and full disclosure again, I'm not a game developer. I've never developed a game at all. I don't have any coding under my belt. I'm a shitty artist. The way I got into the industry, which I would not claim to be in the industry, is that I got it through teaching. My background, I'm a geologist, and my background is in geophysics and chemistry and climate and stuff. The way I got associated with all of these people is I just threw myself out there. I sat in this panel in 2012, and I thought, oh, that's kind of shitty advice. I'm hearing things that you could be not wasting people's time so much. I didn't like what I was hearing, and being a teacher, I was really wanting to convey the most effective information in the shortest amount of time. And so I threw myself out there, found my way to connect with ReadPop, found my way to sneak in and meet the people that organize these panels, and then all of a sudden say, hey, my name's Benjamin, this is what I do, boom, boom, boom. And then lo and behold, the next year I was doing it, and then the next year, and the next year. So I did teach in games-related materials at the college I was teaching at in Burlington, Vermont, and then came down and found my way, very luckily, into Turbine, so our Boston developer, and then got laid off 6 months later. So, and then just kept at it, kept connecting all of these people, kept trying to develop things, because that's what I do. I see a problem and I try to fix it, I try to tie things together. I'm currently a business developer for an augmented reality company, and there's a booth on the floor called Skreens. We have a technology that's coming out to change the way streaming is done and whatnot. So I'm not a game developer at all, but I would go to all these meetings, meet all these people, talk about a really creative industry that I love to see people actively work in and see creative minds meet left brain, right brain, and I just couldn't stay away. And yet, I guess you could say I'm in the industry now. Here I am. So I'll double down on what Trevor said, is get out there, put yourself out there, go to all the meetups, meet the people around you, and don't think that you have to fall into a certain category or that you went to school to study one thing means that you're locked into that. And that's all I have to say. What not to do, I'll come back to that as well, because I don't really have something fresh in my mind. So let's move right along.
Hi there, I'm Damian, Isla, and I'm an engineer by background, an AI guy originally. I've got kind of one part of my background in AAA, one part in indie. I started off in the industry as the AI lead on Halo 2 and Halo 3. I worked furthermore on Halo 3 ODST, a little bit on Destiny, a little bit on Bioshock Infinite, and actually for the past couple of years I've been sort of jumping back and forth between the indie world and the AAA world. I started a company in 2009 called Moonshot Games with some of my ex-Bungie colleagues, and then even more recently, another company called the Molasses Flood with some of the refugees from the Irrational implosion. Yes, pour one out for Irrational. Yeah, I mean, that's stuff not to do. I absolutely love the don't be a jerk. That's absolutely true. So I'll plus one that one because collaboration is absolutely key to success in this industry at all levels, no matter what level you're looking at. For things to do, I agree with the networking and so on, and getting yourself out there and knowing the creators and so on. I never want people to sort of lose sight of maybe what is the most simple thing to do, which is to be excellent. Like, you have to be excellent at what you do. You have to take excellence seriously. Because I think there's breaking into the industry and there's breaking into the industry. Like, I think anybody in this room can start a company tomorrow, register an LLC tomorrow, and start making little games under your label. And you'll be in the industry, but whether or not there's like a future to that particular venture, whether you're actually growing your excellence there, is it's a big question whether that's true. I think if you do want to work at a place like Harmonix or Irrational or Bungie or any of these kinds of places, you have to know that they do take their culture of excellence very seriously. And so if study the masters, and if you're an artist, then like be an excellent artist, be the most absolute excellent artist you can possibly be, and then you cannot be ignored. Because honestly, like, when I see a portfolio that is absolutely excellent, I have to talk to that person. I'm talking as a person who's hiring people now. So you can't be ignored when you're excellent. So that's what I would say, be excellent.
All right. I'm Dave Bisceglia, co-founder and CEO of a mobile gaming company here in Cambridge called the Tap Lab. Been around for just about 6 years. And I'd say I definitely echo the idea of kind of shooting to be excellent at your specific talent. Another thing that I've always said is make a game. So often folks they'll apply to studios and say, oh, I'm really passionate about the games industry. Everyone in this room is passionate about the games industry. A lot of folks have portfolios, but there's school projects that they never finished, or their little side projects they never saw through. And I do a panel every year here at PAX. Actually, this year we're doing it at South by Southwest next week, called "I'll Show You Mine If You Show Me Yours," and it's just a bunch of kind of successful game developers and designers showing off their first games ever. One truth is that they all suck. They're terrible games. Actually, they're actually kind of hilarious, which is why the panel has gone so well. But I asked them to, share that, and it's kind of difficult because these are folks that have made games that we all know and love, showing off something that, why are they proud of it? The truth is they are proud of it because it's the spark that got them in the industry. And when you ask them the lessons learned, I mean, Will Wright gave us a video, and he showed one of the first games he made. He said one of the lessons learned from there was a spark for Sims and SimCity. So, that first game can really be your stepping stone in the industry. Scope is the last thing I'd say for that project. Make sure you scope it way, way down. Don't try to build a massively multiplayer, insane game. Just get something you can actually bring to fruition.
Any comments come to mind while the others were speaking? Please jump in.
Does everyone in this room have access to paper and pens? Then you too can prototype a game. It's just
Are you
that
talking analog?
I know, right? It's crazy. The way to get started really doing game design is just, first of all, write down your ideas and start paper prototyping it out. The building blocks of most video games start out on paper, and there's no reason you can't start building it that way. You can design games, you just have to do it.
I think another thing that's really important, that you can exercise through that process, is learn to think critically about the games you make and the games you like. I got a job, I answered a want ad, which is a ludicrous way to get into the games industry. That was 23 years ago. But one of the things that I believe got me that job is I went to school at a liberal arts school that taught critical thinking, that taught the ability, I was in the film program, and so it taught not how you should make movies, and it wasn't all about you're going to learn how to operate this camera. It was understand what editing is, understand what cinematography is, understand what screenwriting is, understand how one directorial choice affects the relationship between the filmmaker and the audience. So when I went into this interview and I talked about the games I liked and the games I didn't like, it wasn't like, well, that sucks, or that has a lame story. It was like, oh, I found this hard to use, or I was able to tease apart in the games I played what aspects of those experiences were successful or unsuccessful. And if you're making games, regardless of whether, like I myself, I'm in design, although I do some programming, or in any other field, you have to be able to figure out how your pieces fit into the puzzle and how they more often don't fit, and how you can make them fit. So if you can, as a game consumer, think about not just whether you like a game or dislike a game, but why you like or dislike it. That'll take you one step further towards being able to make games. And if you work in paper prototyping, you can very quickly iterate through a number of versions of a game, and as you try to understand what aspects of it are fun or not fun, those are the critical skills that can help you speak knowledgeably in an interview and get you a job.
I think another thing there is, that is an incredibly important skill. And it's, most folks, when you're, do what you're passionate about for a living, it kind of changes that passion. So every time, you play a game, you start ripping it apart and saying, okay, how does this work? One thing I suggest not doing is when you apply to a gaming company, don't say, I love your games in a meeting when you haven't played their games, because that's happened 2 or 3 times, and I always say, oh, really, which game have you played? And, they'll kind of remember the name of one, and I'll ask them about it, and it's very clear they have no idea what the hell they're talking about, and they've never played the game. With that said, I've hired 2 people who played the crap out of our games. Actually, just players of our games, sending us QA reports, every week, just for free because they love the game and they wanted to help out. And after a while, I was like, well, shit, I should be paying these people because they're working for us. And you know, a lot of passion. They clearly wanted to work with the company. They didn't even come up and send me a cover letter or a resume. They just started working for my company without asking me. And do that. If you really want to work somewhere, you know, be active in the forums. You know, start helping other players. Start providing valuable feedback to the developers and become their friends. And you know, you'll greatly increase the likelihood of getting a job offer.
Yeah, actually, inside of games, I got hired in to do everything. Like, that wasn't making games. Like, QA was the closest I came, but I was doing office support and marketing and sales support and all sorts of stuff like that. And the way I got my job was just a piece of what you were saying. In QA, as you're critiquing games, you're demonstrating your knowledge of the games. Like, I actually created a screenshot mockup, which was like, not just, I don't like the interface in this game, but I think it has a problem of organization. And if you look at this organization, you might be able to see how it could be better. And the first reaction from the boss was like, oh, we're not going to do that. And then the next day it was like, yeah, we're probably going to do that. And then I got a design job in the studio soon after that. And one other little detail on that, like if you go to an interview at a studio, just even simpler than what you're saying, have played their games, know what they do for a living, and be interested in it. Because if you're not, one of two things, they will pick up on it and they won't want to hire you, and maybe you shouldn't be going for a job there. So familiarize yourself with it. It's a rookie move to go in and be like, oh, you make music games. I love Guitar Hero 3, which we didn't make. So yeah, just know what you're getting into.
You told me you'd never talk about my interview in public. So yeah, I actually have to double down on that. So when I did get into WB, I was actually working in product and platform development. So I was relying heavily on communication with the other Warner Brothers studios around the continent, actually. But you know, I looked around and I thought, you know what, having come from education and then coming down to Boston, the education capital of arguably the world, I said, hey, what are we doing, you know, to engage MIT and Harvard and Tufts and Northeastern and BC and BU and all the community colleges and so on? And they said, you know, Benjamin, we don't really have time for that. And I looked at him and I said, your $400,000 annual recruiting budget suggests you have time to talk to MIT. Would you like me to interface between the teachers, the students, the student groups, the people at the industry that I knew like the back of my hand because I taught at a number of schools for a number of years? Oh yeah, sure, go ahead, whatever. So basically I found a problem and fixed it on my own after I would do my product and platform, you know, development duties 40 hours a week. I would then start to organize these meetups and these groups with different schools, connecting researchers that I knew was valuable and that were working at Northeastern, for example, the game analytics group that literally published a book on game player analytics out of Northeastern, and here Turbine was with these massive worlds that they were building, and here's a game player data research group that could probably really start working on some of their problems if Turbine needed a hand on it. And then you could potentially have a couple of people that worked with your data come right out of school and go right into employment, familiar with them already. So being a non-developer, I look at a problem and it's like, well, I know how to fix that. And don't ask sometimes, just go to them with the solution, say, I see you got something wrong here, this is what I recommend to do it. Do you want me to do it? And normally the boss will be like, yeah, just get it done, do it, sure, Benjamin, whatever, just keep yourself happy, do what you do. And it leads to wherever the hell I am now. So, any other comments?
I mean, I wouldn't mind giving a counter a little bit to some of the comments that have been made about the importance of making game. Go out, make your own game right now. Why aren't you making a game? Like, I think that's really good advice for designers, which I'm not sure that's like the best advice. I'm going to speak specifically about engineers right now. I feel like as someone who is who interviews engineers, I don't need to play like another clone of Flappy Bird or something. Like that ends up not being an impressive portfolio piece for an engineer. The fact that you're able to do a vertical product at a small, mediocre scale, at a small scale to a mediocre quality is not as impressive as a tech demo, to me, a tech demo that does something really hard really well. So if I'm looking for an engineer, I honestly probably will not play your game if you send me a link to it. Like, I'll look at a video, and if it looks like something's interesting is happening, I may look at it further. But I will definitely look into someone who sends me like, here is a physics engine, 3D physics engine that I wrote from scratch, or here is a software renderer that does something really interesting that other renderers do not do, or here is a voxel engine I created. That's the kind of advice I would give to engineers. Like, pick something that's actually impressive, you know, not just something that is sort of easy but complete. Easy but complete is not impressive. Incomplete but really hard is more impressive to me. So that's what I would say for engineers.
So I totally agree with what Damian said, and I think it goes for artists as well.
Yep.
You know, it's cool that you made a small game, and it's cool maybe you put it in Google Play or the App Store, but what we really care about, if you're an artist, is the art. And I can't think of how many artists have a portfolio website that just looks like ads. Or where the good stuff is very deep inside of it. You know, like sometimes you talk to artists and you're like, yeah, I looked at your site, and they're like, well, did you see my sketch? Am I this? Am I that? It's like, well, if that's your good stuff, why don't you put it right there? Well, you know, if what's on the top isn't impressive, why would I click through to look deeper?
I'm sure if we had an HR person or a hiring director on the panel, then they would probably completely elaborate, and they go into tales of receiving resumes and links to this, and having not one, for the artists specifically, not having a 100% perfect imagery on that portfolio. And to kind of double back, you know, go back a little bit, this is a little bit basic, but I'll say it anyway. Obviously, if you're an artist or a designer or an engineer, you gotta have an online portfolio and a profile with when you send anything to anybody, whether it be an application to a job or literally just a hello. You gotta have a link that lets me just go click, click, and just start looking through it. Specifically, if you're an artist, I've had many HR people say, I can't believe the people that do not make sure that every single piece in their portfolio is just perfect and beautiful. And you know, I mean, you could probably speak to what it means to have a not a complete game, but an awesome engineering build in it, or at least a mechanic that you can see used in your game, and therefore not the full game. But when it comes to your art portfolios, they truly have to be your best work. And half-done art pieces are probably worse than like half-done engineering builds. I can't speak from experience, but
it's got to be professional quality.
Right.
I mean, if this is what you put in your portfolio when you know you're going to be judged on it, like once you have a job and you have a paycheck, you know, that's a short thing. It's not going to be as good.
So I'm kind of curious, just to level set, how many people in the room are interested in actually getting into the games industry, just by a show of hands? Okay, those of you with your hands up, how many of you are interested in engineering? Okay, how many of you are interested in design? All right, how many of you are interested in art and production, business? Okay, some other aspect of games that I have not mentioned? All right, what? Oh, sound, there we go, sound.
audio, sure.
With that? Reviews? Cool. So like journalism and yeah.
Journalism.
Cool.
One more with it? Script writing,
Right.
narrative, design, sure.
So one other trick for artists that we've come across is whenever we are going to hire an artist, even a contractor, we'll have them come on and do something to like match our art style. You look at their portfolio and they've done a bunch of different stuff. But the question is, can they hop in the team and be a part of that pipeline? So we'll basically say, hey, take an hour, we'll give you this much. Just here's a style sheet, shows what you can do. I've had 2 artists just do that on their own accord and say, hey, I know they go to our website, they see the game we're creating, they know it's not live yet, but they can look at all the assets out there and actually just rather than sending me a cover letter and a link to a portfolio, just in the email is, hey, I created this new type of Bigfoot for your game, Bigfoot Hunter, and it matches the art style, and we had that come in like 3 days later for an interview. So that's a way to kind of get your foot in the door and separate yourself from the folks that are just slapping a cover letter on each.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's sort of the equivalent in Hollywood of writing a spec script. Like you write a Seinfeld script not to get on Seinfeld, but to show you understand the format. I mean, in this case, you're literally doing it to Seinfeld, but demonstrating the format and your ability to work within constraints. Because so much of, unless you're making your own game, you are working within constraints not entirely under your control. It's an important skill to demonstrate. A couple of twists on this, like Harmonix, we've often hired people, you know, engineers without game experience, fine artists with no technical experience in implementing their art, which can be really cool for some. If they have a really unique style and point of view, which can be incredibly important with art and also with audio, they can learn the tech stuff usually, and that's a bridge we're willing to cross with them. However, there are some cases like interface art, which are highly technical and sit right on the design, aesthetic, and tech fault lines, where it's really useful to have a very focused portfolio showing those skills in some way. In that way, it's like design almost, in that you really have to be right in the heart of creating user experiences. And the one, I wouldn't push back on what you're saying, but I would say that if you have had that experience of creating a game or maybe working on a team with people, more teams are using agile development and Scrum, and in those, everyone shares a bit of the creative vision, or at least the execution of that. So to the degree that you definitely have to be on the top of your game in the discipline you're going for, but having had the experience of making something, even if it's just at the level of, and I failed, and here's how I failed, or we did this small thing and we learned X, Y, and Z from working together, that can speak to your ability to work collaboratively, which can be really, I think, a potent combination with a strong set of core discipline skills.
Have you guys ever heard of game jams? Yes. Okay, so for those of you who aren't aware of game jams are typically a 24 to 48 hour, you get together, make a team, make an idea, and just create a game in that span of time. Now this is a really, really awesome way to find out if you really like making games. Because you may find that, and working with people, because you may find that while the idea of making games is fun, the reality of it is work. And
at a game jam doesn't smell very good either.
And that's the other side of it that I kind of wanted to bring up, is that the games industry seems like sexy, right? It's like, oh, I'm gonna make video games, it's gonna be so cool. But there's a lot of downsides to working in the games industry, which I'm sure that everyone on this panel can elaborate on in detail. Like, do you like working 80 hours a week and not being paid? Yeah, like, there's a lot of aspects of the games industry which really, really suck. And so you have to have a passion for it to sustain being in the industry. I'm sure everyone here can talk about layoffs that they've gone through year over year, having to switch, switch cities every 2 years. There's a lot of stuff that's really, really, really difficult. So I didn't want to downplay that aspect of it. We're giving all this great advice about getting in, but do you want to be in? Are you sure?
Which is often why many game developers, even some here on the floor, even people with booths here, they actually have full-time jobs in other industries, peripheral, maybe even associated, but then they make games on the side. And maybe they have to do that until one day they actually get a hit and it flips over and then I'm a full-time game developer, but it is what it is. And to couple on that, if you really have a burning drive to be in the industry, then you're probably already making games already, and you better show that and be able to show that, be able to reference it and talk about it, and talk about anything you learned or the pitfalls and perils you went through to get it out, or what actually trying to self-publish is all about, and your frustration with putting something on the iStore and it not, getting any traction or whatnot. And you're already doing it right now. If you're a designer, you've probably looked at some of my shitty formatting and been like, he needs to move that over, the font sucks. If you're an artist person, then you probably look around and walk around PAX and be like, oh man, I can't believe that's on the PAX floor. I could do something better. And if you're a programmer, you may have walked up and said like, why'd you do this way? And you're constantly thinking and doing it in your head. And if there's no other comments, which please keep them flinging. I reached out to the Reddit and the Penny Arcade communities before the panel and said, hey, throw me some topics you want me to cover. So I'll cover one of those now. We did mention that Boston and other concentrated areas are awesome for game dev because people are physically close together. Game jams are awesome because we're all close together. But there are times when that doesn't happen, especially those people who have traveled to get here. So looking at your list of panelists, mostly focused on mobile games or big name studios, I'm wondering if this is the route you plan on taking this panel or if it's going to cover broad range topics. Something I think is very important is the willingness to move. For example, I live in Alabama, and there's pretty much nothing here if I want to go work for a game studio. Yeah, there's a few, but not something like Boston. And even if you want to be in Indy, it's still hard to network when there's no one around to network with, which actually has been very hurtful for my studio. I think a lot of people need to realize how important going to where the jobs are is for something like this. Although I agree completely, and the panelists I'm sure will agree with that, I did root back to like a talk I did a couple years ago, and I found this Reddit post by Frictional Games who made Amnesia, and since then they've made Machine for Pigs and more games. And they did an AMA, this is like 2012, so it's just 10 months ago. We are frictional games creators of Amnesia, Dark Descent, ask us anything. And one of the questions, as you can see on the bottom, says, do you guys ever just sit around the office and watch YouTube videos of people freaking out over your game? And his response was, we might if we had a common office. The entire team has only ever met once. And that is a common thread. Now that we have the ability to connect virtually through the inner tubes, and then we also have all these great tools online as well, collaboration has never been easier when you're forced to be apart from people. That being said, having a concentrated city like this is awesome too. So use it when you got it, but also know that a lot of development probably has to come virtually. I mean, do you guys have virtual people in your studios? Have we ever worked in virtual scenarios?
Yeah, we're, first of all, I think he is right. You know, making video games is not like ordering a pizza where you can do it, I don't know. It's not like ordering something from Amazon. But the way the world works now with instantaneous global communication, there are people you've heard of who started off just being big online, like Phil Fish, who inhabited the TIG source forums until, you know, we launched Fez. But yeah, at Disco Pixel, we have people in San Francisco and Tokyo and Manila. It's pretty worldwide. And if we can do it, we're teeny. I mean, it happens.
I would say don't be under any illusion that it is not a disadvantage, because it is a disadvantage. It will always be a disadvantage to not be sitting in the room with the person you're working with. So if you have the perfect collaborator who's working on the other coast, great. But I mean, it's always better to be in the room with the person. I just don't think there's any getting around that. And I personally completely agree with the fact that if you want to make video games, I think you should move to Boston. Well, less Boston now than a couple years ago, but LA, San Francisco, Seattle, Montreal, like they are such vibrant communities there. You get to meet face to face some of the top talents. You get to learn from some of the top talents face to face. So I think there's a lot to be said for, like, if you're really serious about it. It's, you know, it's just like movies. If you're really serious about movies, you really got to consider at some point in your life moving to LA or New York or some place where movies are made in a serious way.
I think from the like studio's perspective, 3 years ago here at PAX, actually maybe even 4 years ago, my co-founder and I were looking for an artist or designer, because I'm terrible at art, and I did it for the first 2 games. Actually, some guys in the Ukraine did it. And we walked around with these little cutouts that we made where I drew dinosaurs and spaceships, and I said, I'm bad at art, are you good? We had little things that had our business cards in them, and we collected like 150 business cards. We happened to meet this guy whose best friend was doing art for a studio in Philadelphia, or near Philadelphia. Got on a call with him, he sent us some art, we loved what he did, and we worked remotely with him for 1.5 years. We didn't pay him for the first year, but he just loved what we were doing, he was really passionate about it. Then we went off and raised some money, and eventually got to the point where he was now heading up an art team virtually. Once he had to manage people like that, and the studio started to grow, it was basically, he knew it, we knew it, he had to move here. So I think starting off remote and then knowing that you can make that transition and be there is important. But to your point, like there's something about being in person, especially when you're managing a team, that's incredibly important. The only other thing I'd say there is, you know, I think, you know, from my perspective, like running a studio here in Boston is great because there is a bunch of talent here and there's less competition. But from your perspective, I mean, there's many more opportunities out there in other locations. So go on gamedevmap.com. If you haven't already, you can see every studio in any geography. But don't just do blanket emails, as we said earlier. Like, do your homework on each one of these studios before you reach out.
I've got sort of 2 sides of a point. First off, we'll start with the silly raising your hands, and we'll do the serious one that makes you all feel weird. If you want to make games, raise your hand. if you have in the past, let's say month, worked on advancing your craft in games, a YouTube tutorial, some online course, worked on a game, written a spec for something, raise your hand. Okay, what about in the past 2 weeks? Okay, that's actually really good. At this point, the tools, there is literally no excuse to not be making games or learning skills. The amount of knowledge that's out there, the amount of information, the communities that can support you are out there. So one side of the coin is, yeah, make games. If you raised your hand the first time and not the second time, then do something, anything. Choose a discipline. It doesn't matter if it's the one you want to do. Do something you're bad at to learn how to get better at it. Do something you might want to do to learn if you really do want to do it. Now the other side, and it's one of the things that I think is the most important, is to be brave. It's incredibly scary to put yourself out there by creating something. Like as someone said here, like you should be making games, and I'm someone who didn't for a very long time. I have worked inside of corporations and companies because that creates the backstop that puts my back against the wall, so I have to make something because I'm really terrified of expressing myself, to be quite honest. And I've gotten better at that over the years. So you have to find some bravery in yourself to express yourself. And that could be something where there are support groups for that and medications in some cases. But it's really important. If you find yourself not taking a step down the path towards making a game, look inside and try to understand what that is. It might not mean you shouldn't do it. It might mean that you have some work to do inside to get to the point where you're confident enough to say, fuck it, I'm gonna make something. I'm gonna make something that other people are gonna like. So that's two things.
I think following right along with that, learning how to accept criticism for your games and change them is also very, very important. Because you're never going to get better unless you can hear when people are telling you there's something not fun or not right about your game. So, and that's very, very hard because sometimes that game is very personal to you. And so it's hard to accept the feedback, it's hard to hear it. And the temptation to be like, well, you just don't understand, is always there. But that's, I think, why it's important to go to meetup groups and show your game to people, go to demo nights, and get feedback, get honest criticism from sources that you trust and that you trust, not to just be like, oh yeah, it's fun, it's awesome, because that's not going to help you.
Only the last version of the game you make is the good one. You're going to make a lot of shitty game on the process of making a great game. And it's incredibly important to listen to other people's critique and to do it without being defensive, because they will tell you, and the masses will tell you, even the masses, like 1 or 2 people over drinks at one of these meetups, what isn't working. Even if you think it's working. You're inside, you're too close to what you're doing, whatever you do. It's incredibly important to take that advice and learn how to be like, oh wait, they all think it sucks. Maybe it sucks today, but it won't suck tomorrow. If you listen and find a way to make it better.
I have two.
It might suck tomorrow.
Give it a couple weeks.
I have 2 side points that just after listening to these guys talk here. One is in terms of being brave. One thing you have to do is if you want to be a producer and you go to a studio where you do not have enough experience to be a producer, don't tell them that you only want to join the company if you can be a producer. So many people get their foot in the door doing something like QA and work their way up to being something else. There's a guy on our team, Chris, who joined as a QA guy, but on day 1 he told me, I want to be a level designer. And I remembered that, and once we started building our levels for the next game, I started bringing him in on those meetings. Now he is our level designer. And that was like a year and a half, maybe, not even, for him to make that transition into the role that he wanted. And now he's actually making his way towards becoming just a game designer at the studio. So just keep that in mind and be open and flexible early on. The other thing that came to mind, just based on discussion, is in terms of being able to take critiques, criticism, find advisors and mentors now that can help you out and can rip your shit apart before you go into interviews. And when I say mentors, I literally mean like the founders of your favorite gaming studios that are here. Like, go up to them after their talk, get their business card, and talk to them. Be human. Don't be like you know, annoying. But like, for instance, the founders of Harmonix, like Alex and Aran, like my gaming studio wouldn't exist if those guys didn't, you know, take a couple meetings with me in the early days and help me out, and just give me some advice and point me in the right direction. And now I've got, you know, dozens of folks, actually a couple of guys on this panel that, you know, Trevor I met through, you know, Boston Indies, and he's given me some insanely valuable advice over the years. And you don't have to be, I mean, honestly, we all want to help you guys. There's no like ceiling, like you can talk to anyone in town, and it'll really help accelerate things. Getting warm intros to other studios, just getting coached on how to position yourself, and it's a good way to just get your foot in the door in the industry.
Just one distinction, something that you said about, you know, your guy who became a designer from being QA. I think one thing that we're kind of maybe dancing around a little bit is that I think one big advantage that engineering and art, since Trevor mentioned art as well, one big advantage both engineering and art over some of the other disciplines is that the requirements for that job are like very clear and very measurable, even at application time. You know, we send out engineering tests to people before we bring them in to the actual building to have a face-to-face interview. So we already have a good sense of like what their engineering skill is, how clean their code is, and so on. And similarly for an artist, like you look at their portfolio, you can see immediately whether they know what they're doing. The curse of the design discipline is that no one really knows what good design is, and it's hard to quantify. And it's very subjective, and I mean, unless you do have like a successful iOS game under your belt or something, which, you know, not everyone's going to have that. But a hard thing about it is that like it's, you know, I might come in, if I present my ideas badly, then you might think I'm not a good designer, but maybe I just didn't express myself well. So it's a much more it's a much fuzzier discipline, and I think the same goes for producers. Like I don't know how to tell who's going to be a good producer in an interview, just as I don't know who's going to be a good designer in an interview. So much of being a good designer is, you know, yes, team collaboration, team leadership, you know, like being able to move the entire team in the same, you know, direction of your vision, convincing everyone that your vision is the correct one. So in some sense, I think it's easier to get into the industry as an engineer or as an artist, because at least you have clear metrics that you have to reach, and, you know, once you reach them, you can make a really strong argument for why you should be hired. I think it's much harder to sort of make that argument, or maybe just that the argument, if you're talking about a design role, is a much fuzzier one, and maybe more based on things like your personability and, you know, the people that you know, and, you know, if you can get references from people they know. And so
I think that's a really good point. I think there are some design disciplines that are a little easier. Level design, you can have a similar portfolio, I think, usually with off-the-shelf game engines. Systems design is much harder to do because that really does involve maybe that sort of facilitator role. One thing we will do to try to mitigate that, I used to hire a bunch of people at Harmonix for the design department, is we started doing live design tests. Like if it was a level designer, we'd have them design a level on a whiteboard. If it was a systems design challenge, we'd have them. And we'd sit with, like, we'd get an artist, an engineer, and a few designers, and we would watch them manage the room. And yeah, that's the only way you can sort of like shake those soft skills out. I would say about with portfolio and sort of to the point of mediocre games, like particularly in design, if you come in with a game and it's not great, but you know why, and you can speak to why, you can speak to what's better. If you can, again, to the earlier point, tease it apart and sort of, you know, like dissect the patient. That's the wrong analogy, but if you can pull it apart and like explain how it works. The patient didn't do so well. Yes. Never got into a medical career. But yeah, if you can demonstrate that you understand the guts of these things and how they work, that can be super powerful. Definitely.
Actually, one point to build on what Chris just said, when you have a portfolio game that you've made as a student, it only has to have one thing that's amazing. And it has to have one thing that's amazing. But if you have some really cool collectible card game that has an awesome multiplayer battle mechanic, and it's got programmer art, that's fine. Nobody expects you to a team of students to do professional AAA quality stuff, but it's got to have one thing that's awesome.
Like a creative spark and some sort of insight inside of that is pretty much what you're looking for.
Alrighty, I'm going to bang through a couple questions that we had online, then I'll actually see if we have time for a couple people that hopefully have questions that veer from the ones that we're going to cover. I picked these because I think they're general yet actually specific enough that makes any sense that they'd be applicable to a lot of people. So many job openings have qualifications that require, quote, 3 shift titles minimum. So if you're just getting started out of college and you don't have any shift titles, how do you get the qualifications? Are self-published games an option? Are they even taken seriously by studios? Thanks. We'll try to answer these pretty quick, bang them out.
You know, when you're actually trying to hire people and you put together those job requirements, it's all loosey-goosey. If you would ship 2 titles and not 3 titles, that would probably be fine. And if you're a very strong candidate, you got a great portfolio, great engineering skills, you know, it's probably fine too. In design, maybe that's where if they're looking for somebody of a certain level of seniority, it's harder to take somebody who's never shipped a game and make him a lead designer or make her a level designer.
But in terms of like indie games and platform, I hired a really talented designer at Turbine back in the day, who had been working in law but decided they wanted to get out of it, and they'd been making adventures in RPG Maker, the off-the-shelf thing, and he'd had a following. Like you could go, he sent me to the RPG Maker community, and people reviewed his games and really liked them, and like I took that totally seriously because quests is quests as far as I was concerned, and he showed the sort of like and then we interviewed him, and he showed that he was the right kind of person to do the job. But like, yeah, you can definitely find your way in doing just about any type.
Yeah, clearly not ship titles, but actual substance over style.
Yeah, and people are shipping things in Game Maker, like the bar so low to make something that's totally legit as an experience.
Actually, that brings up a very good point, which is when old men like Chris and myself started making games, like basically there was Applesoft Basic, and you know there's only so much you could do with it. But now you have Unity, Unreal just went free. There's Game Maker, there's RPG Maker. If you take this seriously, you've already started, and you know, be aware that the other people who are going for these jobs have really cool things in their portfolio.
We had only 4 colors on screen at a time when we played, and we liked it.
How about
the size of postage stamps?
All right, this is one I'm going to direct at Caroline first. How about non-coding technical areas? Must one be in QA before becoming a community manager, or maybe something in the finance or managerial roles?
No, not at all.
Yeah, you could be a community manager if you're active online.
Yeah, if you want to be a community manager, just start holding events. It's really not that hard.
Seriously.
Just if you don't have a community in your city, start one.
Yeah.
It's like meetup.com, and people will find you because they have similar interests.
They go on to continue. My specialty is social networking. As a poli-sci major years ago, game companies need community managers / event specialists to publicize their games. I don't have any coding or CS background, and I'm wondering if there's a focus on other ways to get into the industry other than a CS coding background. I guess you could say I'm a community manager now because I've developed events for WWE, Oculus, and stuff like that. So
yeah, I have an MBA. It's not like an MBA in games. It's it's a business background. So if you want to start doing things that are more business focused, then just start helping people.
And be thorough, as you said before the meeting. You know,
be consistent.
Be consistent.
Also, big studios, 2K Sports, where I was for a long time, has a whole team for social media that tweets and Facebooks and Instagrams and whatever other verbs have been created in the past 5 years.
If you're doing their job better than they are, they will know who you are.
Yeah.
They will know who you are.
It comes full circle. It's just like start doing it. Like be a community manager for the studio that you want to be a community manager for now, and that's the best way to become one. Because they have forums. You know, there's ways you can interact with them on social media and be active, and they'll know you before you even apply.
One more from the interwebs, and then we'll take some audience questions. I've been out of college for a year when I got my degree in comp sci and took several game design and game programming courses. Since then I got hired and I'm still in school as a web development company. And I've been working there to gather work experience since I've not had a job prior to school. My question is, what can I do to be better qualified to get a job in the industry, the games industry, preferably as a game programmer, short of actually publishing a game? I think we kind of covered this a little bit.
Short of publishing?
Yeah, never really get enough free time alone.
One thing, especially larger studios, there is such a thing as a junior engineer, and they don't necessarily expect you to have perfect knowledge of pathfinding or to be able to, have Damian's decision-making trees down pat. You do have to know what a hack
It's a plus if they do, I'll just say. But.
Obviously. But, there are foundational skills to engineering that are as useful in other industries as they are in video games. Understanding algorithms, understanding data structures, understanding when you use a doubly linked list, when you use a hash map. And you can get into a junior engineering role where you learn all the game stuff if you have those foundational things.
That said, I think it can be really valuable if you specialize in an area that's particularly useful to games. Like if for some reason you're into low-level graphics programming, maybe in the demo scene, whoa, you'll get hired right now. Or tools, because no one cares enough about tools, and if you, for some bizarre reason, are passionate about making interfaces for tools, whoa, you would be hired so fast because we're all desperate everywhere for those.
One thing. Okay.
So no one yet has mentioned. I've heard this philosophy ascribed to Valve. So I don't know directly, so don't quote me on it. But what I've heard is that Valve talks about the T-shape for their hires. They want people who have broad skills and broad knowledge and broad intuition across many fields, and then one area in which they are super experts. And I completely agree with that way of looking at it. If I'm hiring an engineer, I don't like hiring generalist engineers, because generalist engineers are usually engineers who aren't particularly good at anything, but pretty good at everything. I'd much prefer someone who's like an amazing networking person, amazing networking programmer, but in a snap, they could jump onto graphics or AI or something else.
Last one, and I will let 3 people queue up. If you have a question, just go ahead and stand in front. But I think I'll only have room for 3. So here we go. Can a non-programmer get into the business? I'm a hardware-based specialist. Is there any place for high-end tech support? Absolutely, yes. I mean, Turbine alone had a tech team that wasn't even working on their games, but was working on WB platform services to help distribute Warner Brothers IP across the world from its 9 global studios. So there are tremendous opportunities in the games industry that are not actually game development and game creative, like myself, for example. I don't develop the software side. Right.
What about somebody in Microsoft?
Sure.
So one quick thing just to get it out there, we haven't talked about internships yet, and I'm sure a lot of you are thinking about that. Just top of the funnel, like smaller indie studios, most of them don't have internship opportunities just because they don't have the time to train you. So we very often get emails from people asking for internships, and I have to say no, because we don't have the time to train people. So when if you're looking for an internship, just to kind of make the top of the funnel a little bit easier for you, look for studios that have the resources to do that. But don't be afraid to reach out to these studios, and there may be longer term opportunities there. We actually hired someone who applied for an internship 3 years earlier, 3 years later. Just wanted to throw that out there.
Some states actually don't allow assets that are created by unpaid work to be used legally in games. It comes down to some legal things for states. It is what it is. Fire away.
Microphone on? Yep, there we go. Hello. I recently, first of all, thanks for being here. I appreciate this. I, within the past month, registered an LLC, Space Wedgie, gunrocketgame.com, and I'm at the point now where I'm getting into marketing and sort of cold emailing people, and I was wondering if you could speak to, give sort of advice on emails besides keeping it short, concise, trying to put your own personality into it. Are there keywords or phrases to either make sure you include in your contacts or to avoid? What are the things that you say to you, I want to read more of this email, this is a serious person, or they use this word or phrase, I immediately am not interested in reading the rest of this.
Synergy.
I could give you an entire talk about this. So this is probably a much longer topic. I will say that there are a bunch of resources out there in terms of helping to construct really press attention grabbing emails and putting together a press release kit and all the different stuff that's necessary in order to start marketing your game. But I think that's probably a much longer discussion topic than we actually have time for. So grab my email and I'll chat with you, okay?
Can
I mean, personally,
can I say, like, yes, like, particular words and phrasing and, you know, where you put your graphics are great if you're sending out 10 million emails. As an indie, you're going to be successful as an indie if you have something interesting to say. And if you have something interesting to say, that's the most important thing. So we have a mailing list, it's pretty small. I don't know if there's anybody here on the Disco Pixel mailing list. It's like maybe 10,000 people, it's not big. But what's really important is to have something authentic and unique to you and your games.
Thanks, great question.
I mean, I would just add that email in the best of times is like playing the lottery. I just don't think emails are good. It's just not a good medium for this. You're playing the numbers. Maybe law of large numbers means that if you send out 10,000 emails, you'll get a couple of responses. Okay, maybe that's helpful. But really, I would come to places like PAX and put yourself in front of the people's faces and you know, don't let them past you and talk at them.
There's a guy right here who wants to get into games journalism. Talk to him and have him write about your game.
Yeah, synergy! Woo!
Strategic. Okay. Gentleman in blue?
So my question is, you know, there's excellence you talked about in the portfolio, communication, networking, stuff like that. But kind of like what you mentioned too, how important is unconventionality in somebody? So like you said, like there's two people that kept emailing you about a game or whatever, and you hired them. So is unconventionality helpful? And I mean, like, how should it be? Like, for instance, I'm a moderator of the Unity 2D subreddit, which, by the way, we need a lot more to come to the Unity 2D subreddit. But you know, I give lots of free resources to the new developers, and I give very simple and, you know, kind of example work and stuff like that on a monthly basis, and regularly interact with the community there. Is that plausible to show on my resume? You know, when I don't have maybe shipping projects and stuff like that. You know, and should I keep working on that, or should I work on actually getting shipped games out? What's kind of more? Is it more getting that your portfolio nice and big, or I know there's supposed to be a mix, but what's the better focus today? I know in the future things change. What's the focus today if I want to get to the game industry today?
I think it depends on what you want to do. Like, if you want to be in community management, then it sounds like what you're doing would be incredible.
And I don't.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you want to be making games, then make games. In terms of sort of standing out or being, you know, there's good memorable and there's bad memorable. So really, it comes down to finding I think we all look for people that have a certain amount of charisma and a certain sort of spark and interesting or unique insight. We love unique. But yeah, we don't try to hire assholes. So it's that whole thing. You just got to stand out in a way that's positive and beneficial.
If you want to make games, just go to a game jam as soon as possible and start making them.
And I know that was my one question. I think I want to ask you guys, when you do interviews, do you ever ask the questions, what's your biggest weakness or your biggest strength? Do you ask those questions?
Do I ask that of people?
In interviews?
No.
Yeah.
I ask people to tell me a joke that is just over the line. Exactly.
Thank you guys.
About the games industry.
Yeah, no, I would do that all the time. I would ask them where they felt they failed in a situation, or was the toughest creative scenario they were in, or the toughest collaborator they dealt with, and saw how they dealt with it.
We're not looking for like if someone said, "Oh, I suck at writing emails."
Not if I'm hiring them to write emails.
Hello.
Hi.
Here we go.
Hey, so I got another networking question for you, because I think generally I'm pretty good at networking, but I'd be interested to hear your perspective kind of from the other side. So I'm doing a lot of networking here. I'm a composer, and you know, making a lot of contacts, getting lots of names. So when it comes to sort of follow up after that, where do you kind of draw the line between being really confident and being really ambitious, and then kind of being annoying, especially because you know, a lot of people that are here, they just finished a game, or they're about to release the game, and their next opportunity is going to be a little bit more down the road. How do I kind of, what do you recommend in terms of keeping that relationship going, keeping myself out there?
I'll chime in there. So at PAX East for the last few years, many you know, the audio engineers and composers have come up and given me CDs and stuff, and I actually keep all of them in a folder, and I put all of them in an Excel spreadsheet. And then when we had a new project and our sound guy wasn't able to do it, I literally just emailed everyone on that list. Most of them send me emails like once a quarter maybe, which is fine. Sometimes I tell them, hey, I'm not going to be able to do anything for the next 6 months, and they would kind of play along with that and wait 6 months before they reach out again. I wouldn't be too aggressive. Just ask them when they think they'll need your services and have a follow-up ready.
Can I actually say, we like helping people out. And a lot of it is, you just have a human conversation. Sometimes people have interesting things to offer us, and sometimes there's things we can do really easily that are beneficial to you. And so much is just about creating a back and forth and a dialogue that's mutual.
I wouldn't have gotten anywhere if someone didn't actually say yes one time. Sure, I'll see you through. We'll see what you have to say. We'll see how you do. Go ahead, go for it. So, yeah, and so we always pay it forward. So that's it. But I did ask all the panel members to hang out afterwards, so we can, we'll move this out into the crowd.
The best place for that, actually, for anybody who wants to stick around and talk, if you go out this exit door, you'll be in kind of the back corner of that hallway there. It's a non-traffic area. That's the best place to do that.
So I did ask everybody here to give us some time, maybe, because obviously there's millions of questions and whatnot, so I think we'll probably don't push it too much, maybe half an hour's worth of work. So try to listen to the questions that are being asked to them and chime in a little bit, participate, but don't try to steal their time completely, and we're done. Thank you so much for coming to our panel.